My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and we are here today to help you build your career. Maybe your goal is to become an AWS solutions architect or a cloud architect, an enterprise architect, security architect, AI architect, network engineer, whatever it is, we want to assist you in getting there. I've been an enterprise architect, a security architect, a network architect, all the architecture careers actually for the last 25 years. But for more than 2 decades, I've helped people like you get your first tech job, get promoted in tech, change careers. And you can see the people I've worked with at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, PNC Bank, Zscaler, NetSpoke, Palo Alto Networks, and for the most part, any other prestigious organization in the world. And I want to help you get to the career goals you desire. So that's why we're here. Bring us your questions. We love answering your questions because I know when I started my career 25 years ago, when I left healthcare for tech, I was given all kinds of advice from people that didn't know where they were going. It cost me a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money. And I wouldn't want you to go through what I do. So that's why I come here once a week to help answer your career questions. Before I get to the questions, and I see they're already coming in, and please ask them. I really want to help. Before I get to those questions, I wanted to let you know of a couple things we have going on right now. Tomorrow, we have a webinar on how to become a security architect. We're going to go over the security architect role, talk about the skills needed for the security architect role, which are very different from than most people think they are, and talk about everything it takes to become a security architect and get hired, all the steps that you need to go through. And that webinar is free. It'll be live on Zoom. We can have a face-to-face conversation. You can ask me any questions you like. I can ask you any questions, and it's all free. So join us tomorrow on the How to Become a Security Architect webinar. And if you have questions about other types of architecture careers, like an enterprise architect or an AI architect, come. Ask the questions. I'll tell you the subtle differences between the architecture careers, and I'll answer anything that you need to become an architect. And it's completely free. We do it twice a week. The link to register for that is in the chat box. Chris from my team just dropped it there, but it's also in the description of all of our videos. Now, while we're at it, we have a couple of free guides in the description of this video, and Chris will pop a few of them. Guides on how to become, like, say, a cloud architect, or guides on how to become, say, an enterprise architect or an AI architect. Chris will drop some of them. They're completely free. There's even a guide on how to win the interview. They're in the description of this video. Chris will drop a few of them in the chat box as well. And I guess from a business perspective, we're offering 50% off for summer savings. So if you want to become a cloud architect, we teach 100% of the skills you need to master the architect role. And you stay with us until you're working as an architect, and you can take advantage of that 50% summer savings. Now, at this point, I see some questions coming in, and I want to help you with your career. So I'm going to start answering questions. Tommy J, how do enterprise architects actually help a company and what value do they bring? So let's talk about why we exist as enterprise architects and why we're needed. So Tommy J, what if I told you that about 80 to 90% of the time people invest in technology, they get nothing for it? So that's about an 85% failure rate. 85% of the time people went to AWS, they got nothing for it and it cost them too much money. 85% of the people spent money on this innovation, they got nothing for it. And why is that? Why is it that some companies like Walmart or Amazon or Cisco or Microsoft or JP Morgan Chase Bank, for example, have such a huge competitive advantage by using technology, and why other companies or technologies giving them nothing? It's just bleeding them with the money. And the difference is a real enterprise architecture practice. So here's why. So what enterprise architecture is about, it's aligning people, processes, and technology. And that's going to be what's necessary for success. So unfortunately, in many organizations, we have the strategy team, the business executives doing their thing. And then we have the technology people kind of creating technology and for the organization. And they have no knowledge whether this technology is going to help the organization or hurt the organization. And the reason is that people in the tech department don't even know where the business is going because there's lack of communication between the CEO, the board, CFO, COO, and between the, VP of IT and the software developers and cloud engineers, network engineers, what have you, that are building stuff. So what bridges that gap is the enterprise architect. So what enterprise architecture is, find the way for the business to operate. And there's various operating models for a business. For example, McDonald's uses a very strict process and a very strict operating model that enables them to produce the same hamburger in every part of the world exactly the same time. So a business like that needs a very strict business architecture, very tightly coupled systems, what have you, in order to do that. Now, by comparison, the Ritz-Carlton, you walk in there, you spend the night, there's something wrong with your room, you go speak to the manager, they'll spend up to $500 to fix it, to make sure you had a good experience. Now, that business needs a completely different set of structures. It needs a lot of flexibility in its tools. Managers need a lot of flexibility, and the technology systems need to allow people to do a lot of different things, the exact opposite. So what enterprise architecture is first, determining how the business should operate better. And if we make the business operate better and it makes a lot more money, well, then we've done our jobs. And if we take, say, a company that's doing $100 billion in sales, and we can help that go up by 1%. We're dealing with tens to hundreds of millions of dollars that your impact can make. So there's that. Now, the next part of it is the way to do things is the exact process. There's usually a best way to do something, and there's usually an exception to that system. So the next part of what we do as enterprise architects is work with the organization to find the best way for people to do their jobs. If we've got one sales rep that can sell $1 billion and another sales rep that can only sell $1 million, well, maybe that sales rep that's only selling $1 million should learn how to sell like the business person, the sales rep on the same team that's selling $1 billion. And to do that, it's about following the same steps for success, optimizing the processes, what have you. So that's the process side of enterprise architecture. Now, the last side is really the technology side. If we know the best way for the company to work, and that'll give us insight into the technology systems, and we know the best, what the employees need to do their job best, now it's up to us enterprise architects to lead that team to give the best tools for the employees to do their job. So imagine a sales rep that could sell 10 times more if they have the right tools. Imagine a hospital that has a half of the medical errors so that less people die. That's what we do as enterprise architecture, and that's the value we bring. We bridge the business and the technology together. And that's why enterprise architects are widely needed. That's why the enterprise architect role on average is about $200,000 a year, but you'll find chief enterprise architects and chief architects in the role for $500,000 to $1 million or more a year. Very critical role. Great question, Tommy J. If an enterprise architect was to prepare a document for an interview to showcase the value they bring to an organization, what document would this consist of? Tommy, let me change your thinking. There is no single document you can bring that's going to say anything good about you. Just like there is no single pill that a doctor could prescribe that would make them look like a good doctor. So when you go on an interview, you should have a good portfolio with you, because what if I ask you to demonstrate your business acumen? Well, maybe I want to see a business case that you prepared in the past. But if I ask you, can you handle an RFP? Then maybe I want you to be able to pull out an RFP out of your portfolio and say, here's an RFP I've worked on. If you're, sort of, say, focused on security, and you, for whatever reason, we're focused on a big, heavy security architecture more as a security architect than an enterprise architect, I might want to see your risk register that you actually created. So what you need to do in a portfolio is not create one thing. You're going to need to create multiple things that you're going to show multiple capabilities, because remember, the architect doesn't do one thing. So, for example, what might you have in there? Ideally, you've got some reference architectures that you created for various challenges, and you should be able to discuss those reference architectures and pull them out. For example, maybe a reference architecture for a demilitarized zone, maybe a reference architecture for a typical average agentic AI. Average, not necessarily what you would do in every case, but references like a standard blueprint that you could think of. So something like that. So reference architecture should definitely be part of your portfolio. Now, as an enterprise architect, you're going to be creating a lot of statements of work. So a statement of work might necessarily be some of the kind of things you would want to put in your enterprise architecture portfolio, because that's going to be something that you would be doing. Now, you'll be creating various architectural artifacts in your job. And you should have samples of those architectural artifacts that you created, because that's the same thing. So if I'm concerned about an architectural artifact for, say, application integration, you might have one. I could be asking for an architectural artifact about the wide area networks and how you would design them. And that's my point, is I'm really looking for a lot of things. But remember, if it's an enterprise architect, you're also going to have things in there that are going to be related to business architecture, process maps, for example, like a function process model. You might have some value stream mapping in there, for example, that would be the types of things in there. You may have some documents you created to say whether you why an organization might prefer a unification model versus, say, a diversification model, for example, something like that. I would definitely have a business case or multiple business cases where you've prepared, where you can take a business problem, you can quantify that business problem, you can show the assumptions you made when quantifying that business problem, and then you can show how your technology solution would actually provide value to that business and pay for itself, along with, say, a discount, along with, say, like a payback period and an ROI percentage, that kind of thing. Those are the kind of things that belong in an enterprise architect portfolio, architecture stuff. And that way, I'm concerned about your business acumen, you pull out a business thing. I'm concerned about your this, and then you pull out the sample. That's why you're doing it. So a portfolio, not just a single document. Chris, we can bring in the next one. I saw both of your posts, Tommy. So how big of a demand, in my opinion, is there for enterprise architects compared to security, AI, and cloud? So Tommy J, here's the reality. There is a massive architect shortage in 100% all of these careers. And the problem is there's just nobody that can do the job. I mean, there's literally no one out there. It was a recent LinkedIn study, and I saw another study that said that cloud architects specifically and enterprise architects are the hardest jobs to fill in the world, some of the hardest jobs to fill in the world. And the reason is there's a huge demand and there's honestly no supply. Now, when it comes to security architecture, it's the same thing. In the United States alone, there's about 750,000 vacancy and so many for architects. But the problem is no one can hire. And there's some serious statistics that I can actually give you there on that. Same thing for AI. Do you know that only 14% of organizations right now that are investing in AI have done anything to align their people, the processes, and technology, which basically means the AI is going to do nothing for their business and it's just going to be an experiment. And that's kind of like, imagine you were the person flying the plane and you had a buddy that knew gardening and you asked that person to design the plane for you. It's that kind of situation where there's just no capabilities to find anyone out there. So all these roles are really hard to find. And, when you start looking at some of these roles and you start looking at the statistics, it'll make more sense to you. So CyberSeek, for example, reports that for every 100 cybersecurity job openings in the United States, they can only fill 74 of them. So that's a 20%, 6% gap between the people that's needed and the people that are hireable. Now, the real problem is when people are interviewed, They lack competency. They have no idea how to do the job. In fact, in a SANS Gwiat survey of skills, they found that only 50% of security leaders said that they couldn't find anybody with skills. Now, when it comes to not being able to hire people, I'll give you some more statistics, for example. So 70% of employers believe they can't hire someone for these roles because of communication skills. And if you look at Tech Target, they said the biggest reason they couldn't actually hire an architect because of a skill mismatch, because they lacked all the systems thinking, the ability to perform an impact analysis, their professional judgment was needed. That they lacked clear systems thinking, and that was a UK study on cybersecurity, and that people just lacked that inability to see the big picture and actually understand what it took to manage risk just for security people. So we see the same thing in everything. We see people want to become a cloud architect, and 70% of the time they don't get hired because they lack business acumen. Because the real issue is these architecture roles need business skills, they need exec skills, but they also need a different set of skills than design skills. You know, you give me someone that's done 1,000 hands-on labs, they click this, they click this, they click this, they click this. They're usually the person that's going to fail the interview, and I can tell you the reason why. Let's say someone really worked hard, they put a WordPress website together, and they set it up and they built it. And they're coming to me to be a cloud architect. Well, here's what that person did. They proved to me that they could code the website if it's a pretty website, if not, or that they could use a website builder. It taught me that they can figure out how to set up maybe an AWS account, how to set up an EC2 instance or a virtual machine, maybe how to install maybe WordPress on there, even how to upload the code to the system, maybe how to set up an access control list, maybe set up an internet gateway, and that's done. And that person knows how to do those things. And here's why that person fails the interview every single time. Because they want to tell us that they built something, and architects don't build things. Now, when I then ask that person and they hand out their technical thing, which shows me they don't even know what an architect is, but they think it's an engineer. So when they show me their engineering thing, I say, okay, great. I'm not really sure why you want to show me engineering for an architect role, but let me ask you about that project because you were interested in it. Could you tell me how you sized the virtual machine where you hosted that server? Could you tell me how much DRAM you needed and how many CPU cores you needed and how you made those calculations? And the person goes, darn. And I say, okay, what were your security considerations? Which firewalls did you consider and why? And the person has no idea where to go. And I say, for this, what did you do to harden the operating system where the web server was? And they say, what do you mean harden the operating system? And I say, I notice your operating system doesn't have any endpoint protection. Could you talk to me about what you considered in terms of endpoint protection and why you didn't have it? And the person said, and they go dark again because there's no answer that they can give me. And then I see you use the Apache web server. Could you tell me why you chose Apache versus Nginx? Which does each one do better, and how did you make that decision? And again, the person can't answer because those are the things that we're concerned about as architects. And the more people do hands-on, 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 which is how to build, the less they learn is how to plan. And that's why there's no architects out there that can do it. That's why these are the hardest roles to fill, and the demand is absolutely huge. Great question, Tommy Joy. Great question. Chris, we can bring the next one. What is the expected time to become a principal architect starting from scratch, given you take the Go Cloud training and guidance? So Dino909, I'll tell you what happened with me. So when I left internal medicine, I was a nurse practitioner and I left internal medicine. And when I left internal medicine for tech, I had a plan. Now, I didn't exactly know what I needed, but I knew that every employer was looking for something called the Cisco Certified Internet Expert at the time. There was about 6,000 in the world. Everybody wanted to hire them. So, Dino, I set my target on that. So what I did is I spent the next 9 months. I passed the CCI because it was a technical role I was looking for, and that was the perfect thing to do at the time. I also had the other skills that employers were looking for: communication skills, leadership skills, executive presence, emotional intelligence, that. And I had that from internal medicine because we had to take therapeutic communication classes, and I had to learn to talk to patients. Those skills, by the way, the communication, the leadership, executive presence, that kind of thing, they were the biggest skills that made a difference for me. So what happened is I got my first tech job. 3 months later, I was a CCIE. 9 months later, I was working on Wall Street. And then I had a principal architect position at Comcast in about a year and 8 months, 2 years from the time I started my tech career. Now, actually, that might have been a principal engineer, principal architect. I was a principal architect. It was a principal two architect, actually. And I had that job, but it wasn't me. And then I went to Riverstone Networks, where I worked as a principal architect, traveled the world, consultant for everyone. And that was about 2 years in, 2.5 years in. And I'll tell you why I was able to do it and what was different about me, which if you take our training and you follow our guidance, and for the principal architect role, I'd recommend our executive architect program, because it's going to cover a lot more of those things in the principal and distinguished architect roles and executive roles in the traditional program that's designed just to get you hired and get you an architect job. So the key is, when you move into a principal architect role, it's usually because of one of two things that you're good at. In my first principal architect role, I got it was because of my level of knowledge in IP multicast. Now, as I moved into bigger roles over time, it was less about my knowledge about a specific technology, and it was much about my ability to exercise influence, sell, because most of the solutions architect roles are sales roles, pre-sales, design, present, and sell. So I was there in about 2 years. Now, what I did, Dino 999, is I focused 100% on architecture. And I mean, I literally lived, eat, breathed architecture for about 2 years when I started my job. I got home from work. I cooked dinner for my wife. We had dinner, and then I studied for hours. I woke up early each day, and I studied all weekend for the first 2 years, even after I had my job. So that's what I did. But I got there within 2 years. Now, do you get there in 2 years? Do you get there in 5 years? I'm not sure until I meet you. And if you want to come to a webinar, I can assess you. I can see your starting base of knowledge. I can see your communication skills, your executive presence, your leadership capabilities. And I can ask you the questions and figure out it and guide you a little more strategically with information. But getting to a principal role in 2 to 5 years is not hard if you are laser focused. What most people do is they get 10 certifications in 10 different people's careers. So in the end, they keep learning intro level skills from everybody else's job, and they don't go nowhere. But if you've got a strong focus, you can get there in 2 to 5 years. I did. 2 years is a little early, honestly, but I've gotten people there in a matter of 5 years as well. So that's what I would say. Maybe if you come to the webinar, I'd love to meet you. I'd love to talk to you. It's a very interesting name, Nino. Hope to meet you. What architects earns the most and is the most in demand? So let me walk you through the various architecture roles and what I mean by these various architecture roles. I'll draw out I either did it yesterday, or if not, I'll draw it out in real time. So actually, I drew it out a couple days ago. I have it. Let me pull up a diagram I just made. Bear with me. I'm not Mr. Media, so it takes me a minute or two to figure this out. So if we look at an IT organization, let's look at it from the top. The C-suite, we're going to have this chief executive officer that runs the company, the chief financial officer, the chief operating officer is typically the company's number 2. You've got, because they run things, and then you've got your chief information officer. So that's your C-suite. There's a few other C-suite roles, but that's your C-suite. So when you go directly below the CIO, you typically see 2 things. You see a chief architect, and the chief architect is the strategist, the IT strategist for the organization, the people, processes, technology. This is an enterprise architect job. Now, this job is a $500,000 to $1 million job in an enterprise. Now, at the same time, we typically have a VP or an SVP of IT, depending upon how big the company is. We may have many of them. And this is where everybody works. They're more focused on the operations, making sure the developers are developing things, the network engineer people are building their things. Everybody's doing their job. That's typically your operations people. Now, the next level down is going to be an enterprise architect here. And this enterprise architect is another business executive, but this is an 80% business, 90% business job. Most of what we do here is discuss strategy, discuss process optimization. Now, this is your typical Like if you think about a management and strategy consultant with an MBA, that's typically what we are seeing over here in this enterprise architect role. You don't necessarily need an MBA. And I've actually gotten people in enterprise architect jobs that didn't even have a college degree, but typically think they had a lot of business acumen. They had extremely good sales skills, the ability to lead, the ability to exercise influence, lots of emotional intelligence and business knowledge. So that's what this role is here. And this is people, processes, and technology. Now, if we go one step down, we typically get into the world of the multi-cloud architect. This person is responsible for the design of private clouds like Nutanix, OpenStack, and VMware clouds, public cloud environments, including, say, AWS, Azure, Google, Oracle, and any other cloud that exists. And there's lots of other clouds like Cloudflare and other clouds that we would think of that you would use. So they're typically the design of the infrastructure. Now, when you realize that everything runs on a cloud, whether it's a data center or a cloud, this person's responsible for everything, which means they're ultimately responsible for the infrastructure, the applications, the security, the AI, all the data, everything this cloud architect is typically responsible for. So when you get here, you're typically still dealing with the business executive that pays around 200 on average, but principal cloud architects can earn 350 to 500. For example, 372 is the average pay at AWS, 378 at Microsoft, and about 508 at Google. But their pay is upwards of, like, for these things, 300 to 500 from AWS and Microsoft, and about 399 to 677 at Google. But that's typically your multi-cloud architect. Again, this is going to be more business oriented because you can't be an expert in all the domains. Now, at the bottom of the architect group, we have the solutions architects, and I can show you what they do. So the cloud architect is responsible for the strategy, and the people will come in from, say, AWS and Microsoft to kind of convince you to use their stuff. They work alongside the sales rep. They're a pre-sales person, design, present, and sell it to you. So that's where you're going to get your solutions architects. Now, because the cloud architect has to deal with everything, they're going to have security architects that are underneath them, designing the security, the protection plans, security blueprints, security policies, what have you. They'll have IAM architects that'll be focused on the identity strategy. Are we using context-aware versus role-based? Are we using both? Do we need any cloud access security brokers? How do we implement that kind of thing? Those types of things, you're going to see your IAM architects focus. Now, your network architects are going to be focused on the network and the infrastructure. Networking is extraordinarily complicated. I knew people, and actually almost all of the CCIAs in my day were earning about $300,000 a year as a network architect, and that was 30 years ago, or 20 to 30 years ago. Now it's about a $200,000 job. A security architect on average is $229 according to Glassdoor. And any of these can be very high or very low depending upon the complexity. And then, of course, like if we're a network architect, for example, we're going to get solutions architects that are going to come and design, present, and sell from, say, Cisco or Juniper or, for example, Arista or things like that. So that's typically your architects. But, as we get more on the business executive side, typically speaking, the pay goes up. Whenever there's a real specific shortage, and there's a shortage of all, but the AI architect and the security architect shortages are severe, there's typically extra pay in those two. Bear with me. I'm going to come back and switch back to a camera. But I hope that answers your question. And I hope that gave you some information. They're all great roles. Can I describe the workload and work-life balance as an architect? So I've had a lot of jobs in my life. I was a paramedic for about 7 years. I worked 80, 90 hours a week to survive because, we weren't paid very well, but I loved what I did. It was real hard on the body. That had no work-life balance. When I was done that, I was a registered nurse working in the ER for a little while. Again, that was now I'm going to say, and I mean this, and I have the deepest respect and love for nurses, but that was the worst job I ever had in my life. That was the hardest job. No work-life balance. You got home, you were exhausted for a day or two just after the hard work from the previous day. After that, I became a nurse practitioner, practiced internal medicine. I got to say, That was a pretty good job, but you know what? At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was seeing my patients at the hospital. 7:30, I was in my office, worked till 5, and at 5 o'clock, I go visit my patients in the hospital. That was hard. Then I became a network engineer. I was pretty good at it, so I got pulled into everything major. Again, that was a 12-hour day, 14-hour day, coming at 2 o'clock in the morning and change the code. And then I moved into my first architect role. And here's what happened on my first day as an architect. My manager said, we got to get you an Amex. And I said, what do I need an Amex for? And then he proceeded to say that I was going to be spending a lot of time entertaining clients, a lot of time going to meetings, a lot of time traveling and meeting people. So what ultimately happened is, in that role, I spent in that first year $100,000 on that corporate credit card, having lunches, dinners, and drinks with clients. Now, I went to a lot of meetings. I got, that was the kind of thing, go sit in those Super Bowl and that box seats that they have, those super box seats. I still don't understand football, but I would go there with clients. I played a little golf with my clients. I even took golf lessons because it helped my architecture career. And I thought it was the best job I ever had. Now, I did travel a lot, and all architects travel, but it's much less now with video conferencing than it was when my days as an architect. I will say it's the best job I've ever had with the best work-life balance. Now, I'm also going to say, as you move up in your architecture career, a $200,000 solutions architect has a pretty easy job. They come in, they go on a couple of sales calls, they sit with the account manager, they write some documents. It's pretty easy. The average cloud architect has a pretty easy job. The average enterprise architect has a relatively easy job. Now, once you start moving into executive architect positions and chief architect positions, now the stakes are very high. Now, every word you say, because it's going to be in front of the C-suite or the board, you've got to prep it. So you got to make sure you don't say the wrong things. Now, at this point, you're constantly speaking to the press. So you've got to make sure you're on when you're good, interviewed on TV. You can see there's lots of things with me in the press out there, recorded on video at the executive level. At that level, you're writing articles for magazines, so it's there. And at that thing, all of a sudden, you need to be involved in every meeting because you're a key decision maker. So it all depends on how far you want to go up the architecture ladder as well. And generally speaking, once you get past that $200,000 range, people start, as you start earning more, they start having more expectations on you. But most of these jobs are really great. And I have to say, in my life, they're the least stressful jobs I've ever had. But I also told you the other jobs that I've had. So you can understand my reference and perspective, because it's a great question. And I just want to be honest with you. Hi, Mike. With such shortages for various architects, why don't companies train them on the job? Because they can't. So first, there's no company out there that's going to pay to train you. Why would they? They can use AI, and AI can do some stuff. Why would they pay someone that doesn't have a job? And that's why they don't hire a physician and pay them to learn how to practice medicine. Now, the second side of it is TAW 3000 is this extreme range of skills of the architect. The architect needs to have executive skills. And who are the only people that can teach executive skills? Other executives. So what are they going to do, TAW 3000? Take their $500,000 a year people and dedicate them full-time to teaching architects. So they're not going to do that. It's the other reason why they couldn't do it. Now, if we look at what the architect needs, I'll tell you, my architect education was $300,000. That's why I created this training program and made it less than a week's pay for the people globally as a rule, because I just wanted to change lives. But there's the key. So how do you get the business acumen you need? Well, no one's going to teach you how to present to the board. You can't learn that on your own. And that's why jobs like a physician, an attorney, and any of these architecture positions require you come to the skills. Because TAW 3000, do you have the skills, or would you know anybody that would have the skills to sell $1 billion architecture? And the answer is I have. And it's part of the job. But it cost me $300,000 to learn these skills. Now, the next set of things that you have to do is be able to give a presentation and wow an entire room. Now, I have to say, I went and spent a fortune, and my company spent a fortune to send me to places. I was given an executive coach for executive presence. I went to Speak Easy twice, and I highly recommend Speak Easy if you don't train with us. I do. It's a couple of days or a few $1,000s, but they will have professional presenters. They will have actors teach you how to build stage presence. My company kept sending me, and I was grateful to go. But I also got an executive coach. So you can't have an architect that doesn't know how to present. And what are you going to do? Teach them on the job? Now, the next thing you need to do as an architect is lead a team of 15 to 50 people. Now, I'm sorry. I'm not going to give you an internship to lead 15 of my 50 people that are each $200,000. So at $15,000, if I were to give you an experimental chance to lead my people at $200,000 each, that would cost me $3 million just to train you personally for the year, which again, wouldn't make any sense. So that's some of the things. Now, the next thing is they're not going to teach you networking, and networking is a critical part of the cloud. And if you don't understand how things connect to each other and how networks work, you can't do any of it. But what am I going to do? I'm going to hire someone, and then I'm going to have a $300,000 network architect teach the people that I hire networking to make sure that they're actually good enough. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to hire a couple more $300,000 data center architects to come in and teach data center architecture. And what am I going to do? Hire a couple $100,000, $300,000 security architects and then teach security? I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to hire. And what I'm going to do, TAW 3000, instead of having incompetent people, because I can't hire incompetent people, because one incompetent person that makes the wrong decision will bankrupt the company, and say that company has 80,000 people, all 80,000 of them lose their job. So I don't let, and that's the reason why. So that's why nobody says, here, you're a doctor today, go do surgery. You didn't go to medical school. It just doesn't work that way, because it's not going to. That's why no one ever says, fly that 777, that Boeing 777, and take 500 lives with you to Hong Kong. Yeah, this is your first day on the job, right? So you just have to come training. And that's the secret. No one will hire anybody ever again if they don't have the skills. Why would they? They have AI. And why AI can't do any of the architect jobs, things, evaluate trade-offs, lead a team, make decisions with uncertain information, neither can people that don't have knowledge. And that's why you always have to have skills. But it's a great question, TAW 3000. But no, people don't train their own people. Hospitals don't train their own nurses so they can have nurses. I mean, they did 100 years ago, but they don't train their own nurses. Hospitals don't train their own doctors. The people are expected to go to medical school, spend the $300,000 to $500,000, invest in themselves, and have a skill. So be happy. There's a barrier to entry to this job. There's no one that can do it. And that's why if you look at the supply and demand curve, you've got a job with huge demand and no supply. Capitalize on that. Don't expect the companies to turn a $300,000 job into a $30,000 job because it became commoditized, because they had to teach people how to do it themselves. That's the reason why. My daughter is 18 and just graduated high school. What path would you advise her to become a principal architect given at her age? Well, Dina, my first question is, what does she want to do? That's going to be the first and most critical thing. So you can't make someone be great at a job they don't want. So the first thing I would do is find out what she wants. Now, I'm working with a 16-year-old right now. And I'll give you an example of a 20-year-old that I worked with. One of the 20-year-olds where I worked with, his name was Daniel Bosu. You can see a YouTube video of him. He did not graduate high school. We worked with him for about 6 months. He got hired by JP Morgan Chase Bank. There's a video of him on the YouTube channel. And he was a junior architect role he got hired from. We trained him. Really great guy. Think the world of him. And right now I'm working with a 16-year-old. And when I'm dealing with a 16-year-old, we have to understand for architect roles, what you're dealing with is as follows: wisdom and judgment, and at the same time, all the right skills. So the reason I'm taking this 16-year-old and making sure that he gets a CCIE, which is the hardest certification in the world, and I'm doing that is he's a great architect. He's already 16. He can outwork half of the people that are there. But because he's 16, who's going to want to see a 16-year-old and believe they have it in them. So what we're doing for him is we're making sure he's extra good. And the kid's blown away. He's taken all the hardest certifications that no one can pass and already passed it. First, we train him in the skills, but now he's getting the certifications. He's getting the wackiest, hardest one in the world. So by the time he graduates high school, he's going to have a laundry list of things, expertise that are out there and going to be there. And he's going to have the hardest certifications in the world to set. That's going to prove to an employer, well, if you've done the things that most people need 10 years to do and you're done by 18, I got to talk to you. And when they hear him and they speak to him, they're going to love this guy, because I would hire him myself if I had extra headcount. So the key is he's great. So what I first is find out what she wants to do. And then if she wants to become an architect, I would do the following. I would take a course like ours and learn how to be an architect. And at the same time, when I was done that and I got my first job, I would actually have an employer pay for my college degree. And I would make them give me a business degree, not a technology degree, because what they're going to learn in a technology degree is nothing valuable. It's the skills from 50 years ago. But what they will get in a business degree will teach them many of the things that will be necessary to move up in her career. Now, as she's in this career, she has to find that one thing that she loves, that one thing that she truly, truly loves. And she has to find a way to focus on that. Now, the key for everyone is we all have a strength. I call it a superpower, but every one of us has a strength. Mine were two. One is, as soon as I could see how one change to the system would ripple across the system, which made me perfect for architecture roles. I think I got that from medicine. And the other from internal medicine is I knew how to communicate and present. And those were the two skills that made me stand out in my world. Plus, I had an MBA, so I had all this extra business acumen and executive skills, which helped me as a principal solutions architect close bigger sales, which got me bigger bonuses and got me promoted. Because what is a solutions architect? A pre-sales person. So the solutions architect that can bring in 100 million is worth far more and gets paid far more than the solutions architect that could bring in 3 million, because they lack business acumen. So to move up to a principal architect role at 18, I would expect a couple of years. I would expect at least 5 years. And the reason is the perception it might take if somebody's 22 or 23 till they moved into a role that most people won't get until they're 45, 50 or never. So at that point, 5 years into it, she's got a college degree. While she's in college, she does some extra stuff that others don't know to do. Like if she was out, we teach her how to build a brand, the kind of things to create, the kind of ways to show the world that she's skilled beyond her years. And employers would start coming to her and she'd get more options. So that's what I would do. And that's generally what I did. I can tell you I was 1 year into working it. And my manager said, no one in the world knows IP multicast. Any chance you do? And there were like 5 of us in the world that did. And what I did is I tried to make myself irrelevant. And what I mean by that is I started teaching everyone that you can imagine at the company IP multicast. Now, my company was so impressed with my multicast knowledge. I was presenting to the Air Force. I was presenting at this conference. I was presenting at this conference. I was presenting at this conference. And after about a year of that, people kept coming up to me at every conference. Mike, if you're looking for a job, come to me. Mike, if you ever look for a job, come to me. Mike, if you ever look for the job. And why are these architect roles so good at that? Because the architect roles will put you in the position where you're going to get the executive exposure, but you have to do it. Now, the other thing that I would say is one of the secrets of architectural roles is communicating to people. So then I would make sure that she's got good communication skills, comfortable picking up the phone and calling people, because that's a lot of the job. But if she does that and she has great skills, her employers will pay for her college degree. Her employers will also pay to send her from an executive presence training if she's in there, or pay her to take some extra presentation skills training and take advantage of that. That to focus on the business, the leadership, executive training options, as opposed to the tech options, because these are mostly executive roles. And those are the secrets to earning more. And those are the secrets to get there. So that's what I would do. As a fresher, if you don't have experience, what kind of project should you build? What kind of high impact projects would we build in cloud and networking to get a job without experience? So, Lost Stranger, let me tell you the 5 steps of getting hired. The first step is having the underlying skills. And the underlying skills are going to be determined by the exact job that you want. So the first thing we need to figure out is the job you want, so we can figure out the skills that you will actually need. So learning that first. So if you say cloud architect, I know what you need. If you say cloud engineer, I know what you need. And it is a completely different portfolio. Bring a cloud engineer's portfolio and a cloud architect interview, and basically security will say, thank you for coming in. And it's nice to leave now. Whereas if you bring in an architect, so we have to know which career you actually want. Now, the first thing is having the skills. I'm going to just say you wanted to be, say, a solutions architect or a cloud architect. I'm going to tell you the skills that you need. I'll give you an insight into the skills that we need, and then I'll tell you how you would demonstrate them. So in a portfolio. So if we look at the skills that a cloud architect needs, and if we look at what a cloud architect does their job, they're going to need 2 sets of skills. And our job is not building anything. Our job is about insight, professional judgment, evaluation of trade-offs versus this architectural approach versus this architectural approach, or this technology versus this technology, or this process over this process, our ability to guide an organization through change. Now, in order to do this, the primary skills of the architect that are going to cover 75% of the role, and this is why engineers have a hard time becoming architects, is the primary skills for the roles. 2/3 of them are going to be sales skills, because you're going to be selling the architecture to the client. You're going to be selling and influencing others. Now, if it's your first job, you've got to sell the hiring manager into selling you. So understand that you're going to need sales skills. Now, what if I told you that upwards of 70% of people fail the cloud architect interview or most tech interviews due to lack of communication skills? So make sure, especially for architect roles, you've got good communication skills. And guess what? If you were to build a business case, for example, and that business case clearly articulated what was in it for the business to invest whatever amount of money it is for whatever solution, you've proved some communication skills. Now, if it's an architecture job on that interview, you're going to have to give a presentation. And the reason is presentation skills are going to be close to that. So when you're on an interview and you get asked a question and somebody asks you, could you compare block storage, object storage, and file storage? Be able to give them a very clear presentation. What is it? How does that stuff work? What are the trade-offs? What have you? So that should be there. Now, executive writing skills is going to be a key skill for an architect. Guess what? In the creation of architectural artifacts that you would be creating for your portfolio, for example, some of it will have it. In the creation of reference architectures and explaining those architectures, you will prove those executive writing skills. Now, leadership skills are going to be something else. You're going to have to communicate your leadership skills on that interview. Now, the next major skill for an architect is executive presence. This was me without $80,000 to $100,000 of executive presence, education, training, and coaching. Hi, my name is Mike, and today we're going to talk about BGP. BGP is a path vector routing protocol. And then after executive presence, I was taught how to pace, how to use, how to take up space, what have you. So executive presence. Now that's going to come across in your interview. Now, CXO relevancy will come across in your portfolio, and it will come across in your interview for an architect. Because if you're writing a document, and I'm assuming in your architecture portfolio, you have some C-suite relevant leadership, it'll show, do you know how to communicate to the CFO? Did your business case show the value? Did it show a payback period? Did it have that? So that'll be proved in your portfolio. Now, you'll have to have high levels of business acumen, which is knowledge. And anytime you're going to build the business case and build the payback period and build an ROI, you've proved to me you understand business. Now, negotiation skills is going to be part of the job. It's going to be very hard to show that in a portfolio. So that's going to be the business skills that you need as an architect. And then from a tech skill perspective, you're going to need things like networking, things like BGP, things like switching, tagging, trunking, that kind of thing, like 802.1q trunks you might use on, say, a direct connection or a private line to the cloud provider. So you're going to have to understand that. You're going to have to understand NAT and when and where to use and the type of wide area networking to design. So somewhere in your architecture portfolio, one of the layers of your architectures always includes networking. So you will have various network architectures that are going to be one of the levels of your overall enterprise architectures, whatever architectures you have. So same thing on compute. If you're an architect, you're in your architectural portfolio and our architecture designs, you're going to be using all 4 kinds of compute. And you're going to have to justify why you chose a virtual machine versus a container versus application virtualization versus a function as a service. What was your logic? What were the trade-offs you considered? So those things were going to be there, and that would be there. Now, if you're talking about load balancing, I'm sure you would have various load balancing architectures. You'd have global load balancing architecture, server load balancing architecture, storage load balancing architectures. And of course, you should be able to explain that, and that would be there as well. Now, when it comes to security, wow, here you've got opportunities for demilitarized zone designs, for example, security policy kind of designs, and real things. So the key is making sure that it's relevant for your job. Now, if you told me you wanted to be a cloud engineer, that skill would be completely different. It would be those hands-on skills. So that's what I wanted you to understand. You live in Germany, and here every offer for architects are very technical roles where you work with Kubernetes CID scripting. Does every company have it wrong? So, yep, I know a lot of architects all over Germany that don't touch the technology. I know more than you could possibly ever imagine. Now, let me actually talk to you why the job descriptions are absolutely silly. And I actually had Alonzo from my team actually draw out this process because I want you to understand that the job description itself has nothing to do with the actual job you're going to be dealing with. And here's the reason why. It's funny. Ethan Evans at AWS wrote about it recently, and I've been talking about it for 20 years. Here's the reason why. Let me show you. So here's what happens. Let's say I'm the director of architecture. And here's exactly what I do. I have an architect that leaves. I've got a new architecture project, and I want to hire an architect. So I go to the HR thing. I create a requisition to hire an architect. So now I know the skills that I need in an architect. But how does my company do it? Well, basically, since I said I want to hire an architect, the person in human resources says, I guess I got to get it set up. I got to write a job description. Now, here's the problem. The human resources doesn't know how to write a job description for an architect. Well, let me ask you this question. Would you know how to write a job description for a neurosurgeon? Well, the answer is no, unless you're a neurosurgeon. Well, that's the same problem we have here. So I want to hire an architect. Then out of nowhere, someone in HR writes a job description about a job that they know nothing about. Nothing. I mean, seriously, they know nothing. They can Google what our average pay is. They can figure out what kind of benefits will keep us from quitting and going to another company, but they know how to hire and fire people, but they know nothing related to the architect job. So how do you write a job description about a job you have no idea? Well, what you do is you go to Indeed, you go to Dice, you go to ZipRecruiter, you go to Monster.com, and you cut and paste all the job descriptions from everybody else's job that was written by HR that absolutely knows nothing. And now, by the time you've got a job description written, it's a combination of 5 and 6 actual jobs that are totally different, written by a whole bunch of HR people that know absolutely nothing about the job. So that's the real deal. That's why I've never had more than 10% of the skills in a job description. I've never been on a job interview where I didn't get a job. And why was that? I had a mastery of all the skills that really mattered. And I knew the rest of that stuff was irrelevant garbage written by HR people that didn't even know what they were hiring for. So that's the reason. I promise you, if you work as an architect in Germany, you won't be allowed to touch the technology. You'll be giving presentations to the board, responding to RFPs, leading architecture teams. But it is a comedy routine when it comes to job descriptions. If you have any questions, please pop them in and we want to help. Freedom Lens. Good afternoon. Please explain what a DevOps person actually does and how that function relates to what a cloud architect does. So Freedom Lens, what you're basically saying is I've got a neurosurgeon and an airplane pilot. Tell me how their job relates to each other. They don't relate to each other at all. And I will tell you from experience, it takes me just as long to take a DevOps person and train them to be a cloud architect as it does a non-tech professional. And you know what I'm even going to say, and I feel bad saying it, it takes less time to take a nurse or a sales rep and train them to be a cloud architect than it typically does an engineer. And I'll give you a few examples. So Jennifer was a mental health tech, really good emotional intelligence, soft skills, hired by JP Morgan Chase in about 6 months from not working. Now, Harsha was a cloud and DevOps engineer, rock solid. It took him about 1.5 years because he had to unlearn engineering and DevOps and start focusing on being an architect. Now, if I tell you that Wallace Agana was with me for about 6 months before JP Morgan Chase hired him as an enterprise architect as his first tech role ever, and then I can actually tell you how Pritapal had 20 years of experience and it took about the same level. It took him about 1 year to become a DevOps engineer. So what the heck is going on here? So DevOps is an automation, hands-on engineering role. And why is it that it usually takes less time to train a sales rep to be an architect than an engineer? Well, let me go over those skills for you one more time. The architect skills are sales skills, communication skills, presentation skills, executive writing skills, leadership skills, executive presence, CXO relevancy, business knowledge, negotiation skills, and how to build a business case. Plus, networking, data center, security, and applications. Now, let's say I've got an application person that's worked on applications, and DevOps is more applications and automating it. Do you know what they don't know? Security, data center, infrastructure, or sales, communication skills, presentation skills, executive writing skills, leadership skills, CXO relevancy, business case. But they have an expertise in one domain, applications, the DevOps person. Now, by comparison, I've got a sales rep that comes to me and they know how to sell, they know how to communicate, they know how to present, they have executive writing skills, they have executive presence, they've had the training there, they're presenting to CXOs all the time and getting them to buy their stuff. They probably went to business school and they know how to build a business case. Now, all they need to learn is basically the network, the data center, the cloud, and security, and the applications, where the person that just knew applications has to learn all of them. So no correlation between DevOps engineering and architecture whatsoever. If you've got a desire for a DevOps engineering career, I can refer you to my friend Sandeep, but there is no correlation between the two. No correlation between engineering and architecture, completely different jobs. Architecture is all about planning, and DevOps is all about doing and automating, so completely opposite set of skills. Hey, Mike, what can smaller companies that cannot afford to bring a team of architects do for digital transformation? Can just one enterprise architect help or not? Generally speaking, a small business that doesn't have a massive budget for technology doesn't need an architect. They just generally don't. And Andy, I wish it wasn't the case, but look what's happened to small businesses over the years. What happened is, for example, so let's say we had a travel agency. I had friends, they earned a good living owning a travel agency. The tech actually came, the travel agency closed, and the people got jobs for another online travel service, earning 1/3 of what they used to do. So small businesses get crushed by businesses that have good technology and competitive advantage. And I think it's the saddest thing in the world. So what you can do from a perspective, and they're typically not going to need an enterprise architect for this, is you could look at the small business and you can map out where the inefficiencies are in that business. And I bet you if you look through most small businesses and you actually map out the key business processes and the key business architecture, you're going to find a lot of problems, Andy. And most of those problems are going to be people problems and process problems. And guess what? They're going to cost almost nothing to fix. And that's going to yield the biggest return on investment. Now, at that point, what you can do is you can still design technology on them. And that way they're paying a consultant, they're paying an outsider for short-term project work. And the most of the impact you'll be able to make for them is not going to be technology. It's going to be walking in, and this is what most small businesses look. You almost wonder how they even operate. because everybody's doing 4 jobs. There's no key processes, and every small business is like this. And that's the key. If you can find optimal ways to fix that, you can make that business so much more efficient. And in the process of doing that, they may actually have some budget left over for some technology investments where you can help them. But understand, architecture jobs are generally for enterprises. They're generally for the people that have the budget to spend money on technology. Because, I worked with a healthcare client that had a $2 billion a year technology budget. I know banks that have multiple $1 billion a year technology budgets. Those people need very, very, very heavy. But there's definitely some short-term consulting work for the enterprise architect and the people process, and to some degree the technology side. And there is no reason one can't become a small business strategy consultant and include people, processes, and technology. But it's not like a full-time role at most of these companies. These are really good questions, Andy. Chris is going to bring in the next question. Let's say you want to build a mathematical verifiable cloud pipeline, be it DevOps, CI/CD, data transformation. If my data is growing from 1 kilobytes, how do I do that as an architect ready? Okay, Martin, if somebody asked you that question, they don't expect you to answer that. So if I asked you a question and you had an answer for that, the interview would be over. So here's what I really want you to understand. If I ask you to do that, the first question I'm going to say is, why? Why do you want to build a mathematically verifiable cloud pipeline? What are your business challenges you're trying to achieve? How will this solve them? What are the alternatives that you actually considered? That would be the first thing that I'd be concerned about. If you try to solve something without any information, you'd be the most dangerous person in the world on my team. So what I really want to know is for you to, if you're going to be an architect, you're going to have to prove that you get out of the technology. Before we get to this technology itself, well, let's talk about what the goals are. Could you tell me the pain points the organization has? Could you tell me the process that the employee uses to do their job? Can you tell me the current systems that are supporting that process? Where are the weaknesses in the current systems that are supporting that process? Does that company want to change the current process to a future process, or do they want to keep the process the same? What are the pain points with the current process? What are the future goals? What's the company's growth rate? What are we trying to achieve? So when it comes to an architect and somebody gives you an engineering question, they're trying to see if you're an engineer or architect. Don't answer it. Start asking questions. When you start asking the right questions, they will smile and they will stop it and say, okay, we just wanted to make sure you weren't an engineer. Because, David Lithingham says it all the time. I say it all the time. I can't tell you that it sounds crazy, but about 50 to 75% of the time people walk into an architect interview and according to McKinsey, was it McKinsey or no, or that said 60% of people fail the interview because they don't even know what an architect is. So don't answer a question like that, please. I beg you not to. Answer the way I said, ask a bunch of questions. If you've got questions, please feel free to ask them. We want to do what we can to assist you in your architecture career. What's the best roadmap for going into cloud security? No background in IT, but you served in the military as a police officer and have the Security Plus and are pursuing the CCP. So you would say cloud security engineer. So 2 things in Brian. First, I would recommend security architecture for security engineers, and I'm going to tell you why. Most of what the engineers are doing right now can be replaced by AI, but none of what the architects are doing can be replaced by AI. So keep that in the back of your mind. So the good news is when we actually get into security, let's think about the domains of security. One is physical security. And what goes into physical security is things like looking at the building and its ingress points and its egress points, figuring out how the building could be attacked, what have you, the defenses that you would have in place. Good news, you got a lot of experience in that. So that's going to help you a lot. So on the physical security side, you're going to be strong. Now, if you actually think and go back to your background, whenever you're doing it protecting a dignitary, whenever you're going to arrest someone that you expect to be a problem, The military police officer is the scariest role in the world, because what if you have to arrest a MARSOC Marine or a SEAL or something like that? So in order to do that, you'd plan your layers of defense. Boom, 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 boom. So you already have a lot of background with that. Now, a big component of security is actually identity and access management, determining who you are, what you're allowed to do, not giving people rights to more than they have. Need to do that, need to know kind of philosophy. You've got a lot of knowledge there. So there's that. Now, the next thing I want you to tell you is do not take that AWS CCP exam. It will do nothing for you. It is a vocabulary thing that will teach you the name of AWS marketing terms. There'll be no job offers. You won't learn any fundamentals of cloud computing, and it's probably the worst thing you could possibly waste your time on. So don't actually spend any time on there. Now, I'll tell you my certification formula. The Security Plus is what I call a pre-training certification. Like before you learn security, that's what you would do. So what I would want you to do, and I'm actually running a how to be a security architect webinar tomorrow, and I'd like you to attend that, and I'll go over all of what you need to do. But let's think about the generic domains of security that you need to know. So when we think about security, it's going to fall into the following things. And some of these things you're going to know, and some of these things you're going to need to learn a lot of. And you have to learn this before you get certified, because the certification is just a badge that says you completed it, but has nothing to do with the real skills. So you're going to need to know a lot about risk management, like how you would identify an asset, how you would classify an asset, what's a critical system, what's critical data, to be able to assess risks. And I'm pretty sure you've got some knowledge on that. So whether you're evaluating a threat or a vulnerability or the impact of that threat being realized, I'm pretty sure you know a lot about that from physical security. It's the same thing here, but now it's a little more math. Now, you will have to know about, from a risk management perspective, risk prioritization. Now, I know you've got some experience with risk prioritization in the field. I know that world well, but in this case, we're talking about determining the financially quantifiable risks of things that would be there, the cost of downtime, the cost of this, the cost of that, the cost of if an asset was breached. And you're going to need a lot of knowledge there long before we ever think about certifications. Now, you should be very good at developing, understanding incident response plans. I have a sneaky suspicion you've got some knowledge there from your time as an NP. Now, you will have to learn heavily network security, and that means understanding what an IP packet is, what's in those headers, how those headers could be used for security, network access controls, packet filtering, firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, those kinds of things. Understanding how you would segment or how you would micro-segment a network, because that's basically your defense at depth, different lines of defense. How you would encrypt your technology, how you could actually like traffic shaping, traffic policing. The same way police will make sure that people can't go on a road too fast, you might need to make sure the network doesn't allow like worm traffic to go on the network too fast. So it's similar things to physical security, but it's a different perspective to learn. Now, you'll have to kind of understand what goes into application security, things like code checks, input validation, secure assessment management, and understand how that works and understand that so you can understand conceptually what you're trying to defend. Now, the world of identity and access management, you've got some skills here. We're going to translate some of those things to other things, and that whether we get into context aware IAM or federated IAM or single sign-on or working with cloud access security brokers, those are going to be the kind of things that you need to understand. The types of strengths and weaknesses of the various authentication systems, what have you. Now, I mentioned all about physical security. I think you're an expert on physical security. We don't need to deal with that. Now, you will need to understand deeply cryptography, symmetric cryptography, asymmetric cryptography, public key cryptography, digital signatures, the types of cryptography, the strengths and weaknesses, and preventing attacks on the cryptographic system. Things like, salting your hashes, that kind of thing. And you'll need to have some knowledge of security frameworks. That's what employers are looking for. And those are the skills that you actually have to learn. Those are the skills that you do before you get certified. So that's what I would tell you to do. Learn these things first. And then once you're learning, take the CISSP, because that's like the basic intro level to cybersecurity that everybody loves. As soon as you have that, you'll get interviews. Now, that won't be enough on its own to get you hired, but if you learn those things first and you have that, now you'll be there. When you're done the CISSP, get the CCSP. That has more cloud security and more cloud computing on it than the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. And it's real and it works on all clouds, so don't waste your time on that AWS CCP. And then when you're done, go get that CISM, because that'll help you understand how the management thinks and how you can think of it from a strategy perspective. And that way, whether it's incident command at a major incident, or it's incident response in an organization, I think you're going to take all that military experience, which is great, and you're going to put it in here. Now, when you leave and you've got that military background, here's what I need you to understand. Employers have a hard time finding people that can take direction, that will work and have a lot of degrees of mental toughness. So I want you to show that you actually have the ability to take direction. You've got it. You've got the mental toughness to do whatever it takes, and that you've got the experience to stay calm under pressure. When we typically deal with our tactical professionals, these are some strong assets they can bring in to the job that you want to communicate that. I hope that helps you and Brian, and please come to my webinar tomorrow. Love to speak to you face to face. I deal with a lot of veterans. I help a lot of veterans, and I'd love to meet you. Feel free to ask more questions, please. As we are in the AI area, many tools are providing design subscriptions. How can we expect the cloud architect will sustain for 20 years? So JP, if you're saying that, you really don't understand what architecture is. So the issue has never been the tech. That's the easiest piece of the architecture. And if you notice what I've always talked about in the architect world, they talk about the architect skills. And I tell you that 75 to 85% of the architect skills are not the skills you're actually talking about. And what do I tell you what they are and why? So I always talk about CXO relevancy. So for any architecture, and this is why the architect jobs are not only AI proof, this is why the architecture jobs have all 10 out of 10 skills of the best jobs for the future. So with the architect job, I have to ask the organization's executives about their goals. And when they tell me certain things, I bring that into my mind, and then I know how to ask additional questions. So that process going back and forth between an architect like me and the executives may take a team of 10 people months to get this information, because people don't necessarily provide it easy. Now, at that point, once we've got that information, I may have a stakeholder community of 50 people all across various business units that all have different demands. So say sales wants a product out today and a discount on it, and the product team needs 3 more months. So a lot of what we do as architects is negotiate between stakeholders and balance their needs. Now, again, that is human. Now, a big part of our job involves actually selling as architects. Like I've sold a $1.1 billion deal, a digital transformation deal to a global retailer at one point with a partner. Now, in that particular case, sales is very human. It takes relationship with the clients, relationship building. You're playing golf with people. You're taking them dinner. You're taking them to drinks. You're taking them to the Super Bowl, that kind of thing. So there's that. And that's a big component of the job. Now, we lead teams of people because it's astronomical. And we find when we actually bring in teams and they look for stuff, that they had technology and systems that no one even knew about. So that need to lead a team is very there. Now, because the majority of the job is really creating a cultural change around a cloud adoption or around a new technology adoption, that means we need to get the stakeholders on board. We need to get stakeholder buy-in. We need to create an educational program and create a marketing plan and start creating champions and finding other people to do it. So all the things we really do as architect, which are predominantly non-technical, can't be done by AI. So that's why we don't have a problem. And that's why it is an environment that we can be safe with. And, it's really interesting. I think I have this logo on my desk. I'll read them to you. Actually, you know what? I'll bring it onto the screen so you can see it. And I'll give you examples of why when the World Economic Forum just looked at jobs in the future and they listed the skills of the future, they almost perfectly listed the cloud architect job. So bear with me, and I'll show you why. So this is the World Economic Forum core skills in 2030. So if you look at the skills which they see like lesser importance, these are going to be your hands-on tech stuff. And if you notice, we were in CIO magazine, we were in Forbes, and every other publication we've written magazines for where we say, get out of programming, get out of engineering. We've said it for years. So even why we stopped selling our engineering program. So look at the skills that are less relevant and going out of phase, or programming, Unfortunately, a lot of teaching will be done by AI. Quality control, because that can be done by AI. People like me that are multilingual, that stuff goes away because AI can translate in real time. Basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, AI can do math better than anybody. And these types of hands-on repetitive things, these are the dying skills. Now, if we look like skills that are growing, we can see networking and cybersecurity. And for all the silly people that thought networking was not needed, they didn't realize that you couldn't build a cloud, a network, or anything without networking. So there's networking and, of course, cybersecurity. This is obviously in one of the big places. Now look at the top. AI and big data. There's no cloud architect that's not designing an AI solution or a big data solution. Now, if we go to technological literacy, the cloud architect's an 80% business role, but we know a lot of tech. Creative thinking. Wow. We're going to walk into a client that made a mistake and they used a bunch of AWS proprietary services, and now we've got technical debt and we've got to figure out a creative way around that, for example. Or Azure proprietary, or anybody's proprietary service for that matter. Or there's a business problem, or we have to solve one problem in order to create budget. So creative thinking is part of the architecture role. Now, if we look at it, analytical thinking, again, we're evaluating the trade-offs between opportunity 1, opportunity 2, and figuring out which is better for the business. Resilience, flexibility, and safety. Well, these are one of these jobs where we're changing the world for the future. So we're constantly going to be changing. Now, leadership and influence, you heard me mention about influencing stakeholders, selling, influencing the C-suite, influencing the board, and leading an architecture team. Can't replace that. Now, systems thinking, here's one of the biggest reasons we can't hire architects. Because someone says, yeah, I can configure this firewall, and I can say, okay, fine, explain to me how the firewall will stop a threat in real time, and they won't know. Or explain the impact of a route on this router on the other parts of the system. And that's what our architects need, is system thinking. And of course, we say motivation and self-awareness. Well, clearly this becomes obviously critical. In the world of AI, and we need people that are better than AI. And look at that other thing, empathy and active listening. And if you keep hearing me talk about soft skills in the architectural role, you can see the architecture job description is exactly the World Economic Forum's core skills in 2030. So I kind of hope that explains to you why these are such special roles and why I stopped selling and letting people subscribe to our engineering 2 years ago and said only architecture careers, get out of engineering. That's the reason why. Hi, Mike. You're in a solutions architect role, but heavy tech side. You're trying to build the right skills. Currently, the skills you're building is gathering requirements. Are you on the right path? Well, the key is it's not just gathering requirements, it's understanding what the requirements mean. And let me explain to you what I mean. So here's the difference. And I consult to lots of people. And if I ever find someone in a solutions architect role and they're not earning several $100,000 a year, it's because they're still too busy focusing on the tech side of their job as opposed to the digital transformation. So keep that in the back of your mind. So the right skills are sales skills. Now, remember, if you're a solutions architect, you're typically trying to sell a solution. If you can't sell, you can't do the job. So you have to be that. Now, remember, as a solutions architect, your design is supposed to provide that client some business benefit. If you're designing a system for a recommendation, an AI recommendation for a website, it's supposed to help that client sell, right? So if you don't understand business, every solution you create is going to be bad. And the reason is we're going to build a beautiful technology product that no one needs, that's going to provide no real value. Because imagine you were going to jump out of an airplane and you were an expert out of it. And somebody that packed your chute that knew nothing out of skydiving. That would be a problem. But if you're an expert skydiver, you know what to put in your chute. And you're going to have a ball jumping out of the plane. It'll be the thrill of your life. You'll land. You'll do it again a week later. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. You have to have the right knowledge, and that knowledge is business. Now, the key is in a solutions architect role, here's one of the ways you're going to get noticed when it comes down to a proof of concept. If you actually do the work in the proof of concept, you're going to be relegated as a techie, and it's going to crush your career. By comparison, if You are branded as a solutions provider, a business executive. Your career will be something different. So why am I saying this? You're going to make sure you start giving presentations. When you're in a proof of concept, you be the person. You determine what the business needs, the proof of concept requirement. You determine the staffing for the proof of concept. You determine what customer success factors are. You lead that team. When that team's having a problem, you escalate it in the back end. So you, for the customer facing person with the customer, that's the way you do that. No, when you have an opportunity to give a presentation as a solutions architect, go take it, make it these big presentations as much as possible. Because in the end of the day, the people that could promote as solutions architects are the ones that can bring in the most business, that can create the biggest change. So gathering requirements is going to be critical. Now, what does that mean? It means being able to speak to the C-suite, understand their needs, business pain points, and business challenges. Now, if you're not trained in CXO relevancy, you won't know where to go. And if you don't have the business knowledge. So when that exec says we have a 17% CAGR, you need to be thinking about what that's going to be meaning and what the impact that's going to have on the network, what impact that's going to have on the storage, what impact that's going to have on the compute. And how are we going to scale out of it? And you need to understand that. When that organization doesn't want to spend money on security, and you know they need to invest money in security, if you can't evaluate the risk, determine the risk, you can't convince that client to spend anything. Because $10 million on security sounds expensive. When a company's risk is $100 million, to mitigate it for 10 million is very cheap. So the key is there's that. So make sure you get the business. Now, the next thing is really leadership, because you're going to have to guide clients into the right situations. So those would be where I would start with, getting that. Because if you're getting the requirements, you have to be able to ask open-ended questions. You have to have the emotional intelligence to get somebody to want to talk to you. You've got to be able to ask the right questions and encourage them to talk. So I would say the biggest part of the job that's really going to help you grow is understanding how to connect with the person, how to speak to them in their language, and then how to get information. So I'd say that's the first place to start. Now, if I can give you some guidance, the biggest issue, the next issue is how to be able to look at things objectively. So is this solution going to make an impact on the business? If not, don't recommend it. Is this security thing really the right one? And if not, don't recommend it. And to really be able to look at it independent of vendor and be there as a trusted advisor is there. So you want to move up, build your presentation skills, build your executive skills, build your leadership skills, build your sales skills. Because as you move up, you'll be doing less and less tech stuff. It'll be more and more business. And your job will be more focused on what value you can bring to the business than your ability to stay technical. So I would stay there. So make sure you've got the executive presence, the leadership skills, the sales skills, because that's critical, the emotional intelligence, and that oomph from a communication presentations guide. You do that, you'll be in a really, really, really great place very quickly. And you'll be surprised how fast people will notice. And I can give you an example, and I won't give you his name, but I had someone that was on the very technical, heavy side of a solutions architect role. And when he came to me, I said, boy, we're going to make a big change on you. He was great. He was a rock star, but he lacked executive presence, scale skills, all that stuff. Came to us with about a $150,000 job, left with a $409,000 job. And the impact was, that big change was those executive skills. So that's where I'd focus on. Because at the end of the day, if you can't sell the architecture, it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, if I'm going to pay an architect, especially a pre-sale solutions architect, this person brings in 100 million. This person brings in 10 million. I could literally speaking pay the one so much more than the other. And those are the skills. I hope that helps. Please ask more. And I'm glad you're here, Payman. So isn't getting no interview invitations to interview because of the wrong requirements in the job offering? Yes and no. So here's the thing. When it comes to a resume, recruiters spend, say, 7 seconds or less, and hiring managers say spend 7 seconds or less. And in 90% of the cases, when I look at a resume, they're tossed away in the side. And I look at a LinkedIn profile, it's tossed away on the side. Here's an example. I see someone say cloud architect versus cloud engineer. Now, in that, and I'm going to tell you why people don't get interviews, but it's not related necessarily to the job description. So in that, if the person says cloud architect / cloud engineer, that person doesn't even know the difference of the two. They don't get an interview. It's just done. It's over with. So what I need to see is something big and impressive about you instantly. I need an executive summary that makes me want to win. And then I need to see things on your resume that I care about as a hiring manager versus what most people care. And if you want to actually come to our webinar tomorrow, I'm happy to evaluate your resume and tell you exactly why you're not getting interviews. And I'm happy to do it. But the key is it depends on what's on your resume. I will actually say that we expect to get thousands of resumes for an architect position before we can actually hire someone, because most of the people won't even know what it is. So here's what ultimately happens, and it happens all over the world. HR writes a ridiculous job description that's cut and paste from 10 different careers. They want 300 Olympic gold medals, 500 years experience, and things that don't even exist. So that's your HR job recommendation. So what do people do? How do they get past it? They lie on their resume. They put all this silly stuff. They use AI to try and skate it. You know what it does? It passes the ATS. Now, do you know what happens the second that person comes to us for an interview? And I've interviewed 6,000 people and I was able to hire far less than 50. Do you know what happens when that person comes to us on an interview? We ask them one of the ridiculous questions. We ask them a ridiculous question based upon one of the ridiculous wrong things they wrote on their resume. And they can't answer it. They can't answer it all. So what causes this to occur? In most places, what people put on the job convinces me they are not ready for the job. They show they don't understand the job. The next thing they do when they're trying to bluff on a resume is they put things together that fit out of place and prove they don't know. So usually there's a problem with the resume. Now, because HR sends us people that meet their ridiculous job description on the ATS, we can't hire any of them. So after interviewing 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 people that HR sent up that we can't hire any of them, you know what we all do? We then hire an executive recruiter. And we pay that recruiter 40, 60, 80, $100,000 or 100,000 euros, depending upon where they are, to go find us someone. And what happens, the recruiter looks at the job description and says, oh, Mike, hiring manager, I see this job description HR wrote. Are you interested in that? And I say, no, here's what I want. And then that recruiter goes and finds someone for the right skills. And it costs 50 to 100,000 euros to circumvent the HR written job descriptions because I can't find someone. And that's why most of our jobs and most of our students go through recruiters. I did. I don't apply for jobs. People came to me. They told the hiring manager all the reasons they wanted to interview me. The hiring manager was pre-biased to like me. They interviewed him and I knew how to close a deal. So I sold them and I got hired in every single interview. So lots of opportunity, but you've got to put out the right base. So there's 5 steps to getting hired. Yep. And here's the 5 stages. The first one is you have to develop the skills first. And when you have the skills and you've trained them, you'll know what to do. The second set of skills has become what the hiring managers want, because 90% of people fail the interview because they're not what the hiring managers want in terms of soft skills. The third thing is building a portfolio. So your portfolio you will have that you will bring with you. And what's in your portfolio has to reflect on the job. The fourth phase is certifications and branding. So for a security architect, after they can do the job and after they're job ready, I do a CISSP, a CISM, and a CCSP. For a cloud architect, I'll do an AWS Solutions Architect Professional, which has nothing to do with architecture, but thankfully most people don't know that. So it's going to get an interview. I'll do a TOGAF 10, and again, I'll do a CISSP. So we're going to do that. And the key is your skills gets you hired, but those certification gets the world you're there. Now, if you train with us, now we got to tune your resume. And if you don't train with us, hire a resume person and tune that resume and make sure that the person that writes is an actual architect, a principal architect or a distinguished architect that coached you how to write it, because they know what the hiring manager are looking for and they know what they're looking for because they've already been successful. And at that point, tune your LinkedIn profile. Make sure every day your LinkedIn content is showing the world that you're an architect and they need you on your team. And you'll create content and people are going from you. So that's the secret to getting hired. And then after that, it's training like heck for the interview. I put everybody through interview training, and here's the reason why. 98% of people fail the interview because they just don't know what to say on an interview. They don't know how to handle it. So you've got to get trained for the interviews so you maximize them. Those are the reasons think people do. And honestly, most people just get a certification and they think they're ready, and they lack all the other steps. It's those other steps. Come to the webinar tomorrow. I'd love to talk to you. If you want, I'll assess your LinkedIn profile. I'll assess your resume, and I'll tell you why you're not getting interviews and what you would even do to fix it. If you got some questions, please bring them in. We'd love to help. But we can't help if you don't ask questions. Who designs the operating model for an organization? The chief operating officer or the enterprise architect? They collaborate on it. Enterprise architecture is about choosing the right operating model. The chief operating officer is involved in choosing the right operating model. The key stakeholders from the various organizations will have an impact on what the right operating model is. The actual product or service that's created and the consistency needed will have a lot of that. So when we actually talk about operating models for an organization, what are we talking about? We're talking about the business architecture. And the business architecture, to create it like any other architecture, will take a very large team, 15 to 50 people, 6 to 12 months to go figure it out. So you may wonder why there's a CEO, CFO, COO, that kind of thing. You may wonder why there's the president of this business unit and the president of this business unit. And you may wonder why there's key stakeholders in everywhere. That's the reason why. Because it's going to take all of you to collaborate. Because sales needs to know what product is doing. And marketing that needs to know how to help sales or how to help the company. And depending upon how the company's leveraged, how the company's finances are, we're also going to do this. So this is a really great question you're asking. And that's why architecture is not a technical thing. That's why architecture can't be done by AI. Because to just figure this out, that could be 6 months of conversations. This could potentially be a multi-million-dollar consulting project to help an organization optimize that. Many, many millions of dollars. And this is why I love enterprise architecture roles, because there's almost no one in the world that can do it. Because no one understands, how to think like this, how to determine how a business should be structured, how to understand how to tune the business, how to optimize the business. They only know how to click the boxes they were taught in the certification. So I really do hope that will help. We do, along with the team. And Tommy, your question brings about, and you always ask good questions, it really brings about the key concept that architecture is a team sport. No one can design anything on their own, because an enterprise is a living system. There's all these systems that go on, and a change to one system can affect the other changes. So any of these changes need to be planned, and it takes so much information that we need to come in to actually be able to make recommendations. So it's going to be a combination of lots and lots and lots and lots of people. So hopefully that helps. I only have a few minutes left, so if you want to ask one or two more questions, if not, me, Chris, Alonzo from my team, we're going to get back to work. But if you've got a question, I do want to answer it. Payman, thanks for the advice. You're interested in the architect programs. How does it work with different time zones? You're in Sweden, so very differently. Usually the webinar starts when it's midnight here. So we typically run 2 webinars per week, Payman. We run one on Thursdays that we typically do at 1 p.m. We may move that to Wednesdays in the future, but it's typically at 1 p.m., which is about 6 p.m. in the UK, 7 p.m., say, Central European time. So you could easily attend that one that we actually have tomorrow. Now, I will tell you, most of our students globally are either in North America, they are in Europe, or they are in Africa. We have lots of people still in Australia, New Zealand, India, all over Asia, but I'd say 2/3 of our presence, maybe even 3/4 is in the US, the UK, Europe, which I keep separate from the UK, and then Africa. We've got a lot of really incredibly wonderful students in South Africa, Nigeria, Cameroon, all throughout Africa, but especially those 3 populations. We've got a lot of incredibly talented people. But if you look at our courses, they were scheduled for that. So the day classes, for example, that are at 10 a.m., obviously are very feasible times for Europe. The Friday classes that we do around 1 is around 7 p.m. European time. And the only class that's typically rough for our European students is typically the Thursday class that we do from 4 to 6. That one might be a little tough because that could be depending upon where you're at in Europe. It's 9 to 11 if you're in England, but if you're in Europe, it could be just a little bit later. So usually it works, but we actually record all of our courses in case you can't make some. And 80% of our people can't make every class because they work full time, but they stay in our program until they're hired. So maybe join us in the webinar tomorrow. I'd love to talk. You can ask me questions. I can ask you questions. And anything I can really do on these webinars for you, I try to do. And you'll see me reviewing someone's LinkedIn profile because they asked and not getting interviews, and I'll tell them why. Someone says, I don't understand why I'm getting hired in one of these free webinars. I'll interview them. Someone says, Mike, I can't seem to earn more. I don't understand why my peers are getting promoted and not. I can ask a couple of questions, and like that, I'll be able to tell you exactly if it pertains to an architecture role. Whether it be a cloud architect, enterprise architect, security architect, solutions architect, AI architect. Because I've not only hired for them, I've held for them, and I've been a principal architect or greater for the last 23 years. So I really just want to do what I can to help you. So if there's any questions that you have, pop them in now. And if not, let me remind you about a couple of free things we have and also a big summer offering that we have. Tomorrow, we're going to hold a webinar on how to become a security architect. We will go over the exact skills for the job, the role, and the steps we use to get people hired. And that's obviously gotten people hired at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, PNC Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, and any other bank you can think of, security companies like Palo Alto, Zscaler, NetSpoke, those types of environments. I just want the success for you, whether you train with us or train somewhere else. I want you to know exactly what to learn. And that's what we're going to cover on this free webinar. So join us tomorrow. Now, in the description of this video, there's guides on the winning the interview, guides on various architecture roles, the skills you need. Check them out. They're 100% free, and they're all there to help you in your career. And we are running our 50% off summer savings. We can't do it very long, but if you want to become a cloud architect, security architect, AI architect, any kind of architect, we've got an architecture program for you. You will stay in this program until you are hired. And by the time you're done, you have a wonderful job because you stay with us until you're hired. We want to make sure you build the best architecture career. This is Mike Gibbs signing off for now. I look forward to meeting so many of you in the webinar tomorrow. If you had a good time, maybe give the video a like. It'll help us a lot with the algorithms. Maybe leave a comment. Maybe subscribe to our channel. And help share these materials with others to help them in their career.